When you're ready.
Talk shoes.
Recorded live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, the service of the Black Science Fiction Society.com website. Join it, be there, all kinds of cool stuff there. This is the November 4th, 2016 edition. This is the pre-election edition, the post-Cubs win the World Series edition, and a Friday where my ass is tired as, well, anyway, I'm very tired. So today we have, I think, a pretty significant guest. Sounds like a great guy, Reynaldo Anderson, and what he is he's basically the editor of the book titled Afrofuturism 2.0. You can find it on Amazon. We'll drop the link into the chat room for those people who are here right now. For the rest of you, go check it out on Amazon. Just look, do a search on Afrofuturism 2.0. There are several contributors listed, and Reynaldo is the editor of the piece of the book. Well, excuse me. First of all, welcome to the show, Reynaldo. Nice to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh no, it's great having you. Did you contribute any creative content yourself, or were you just the editor? And I don't mean just the editor like that's no big thing, but what was your role in the book?
Well, one of the things how 2.0, giving you the backstory to it, I'm the co-editor actually. The other editor is Charles Jones. And,
okay.
And I contributed a large part in the introduction. And
sure.
What the anthology is, it is the first of a 2-edition anthology. So it's kind of like I felt like the orchestra conductor. My own contributions will be in the second volume. The second volume is going to be called The Blackspeculative Art Movement, Afrofuturism Art plus Design, and that'll be out in the spring of 2017. But what started out, this project started out it as a kind of labor of love to a certain extent. It started out as an abstract or an idea, and I originally wanted to put it in a journal, and I was unable to get it in a journal. In terms of, there were people, a lot of people who are the gatekeepers in academia a few years ago still didn't know what Afrofuturism was. So
sure.
That's when I decided to go on and promote it as a academic piece. And I thought it was necessary to put it out as an academic piece first because, and recruit some scholars to contribute articles to it. Because I thought once it gets the grounding in academia, it's going to make it much easier for people to do some other things with it in terms of it being taken seriously. And I'm not the first person to organize an anthology around it. There were the forerunners. You got to talk about people like Alondra Nelson a decade and a half ago who put together in Social Text that journal. That was like one of the first serious American journals to deal with it. And then for a long time, you didn't have anyone for some years try to put together a series. But the last few years, there's been interest bubbling up with works like people like D. Scott Miller, Yatasha Womack, and some other people. So in the last 36 months, you're really seeing it pick up. But now you have a lot of young people that are really coming on. You have people like, I hope he's still awake, Eric Steinskog over in Denmark and Natasha Kelly. It's an international thing now in terms of people writing about it and contributing very, very good work in this.
In participating in the genre. In August, I was at Mid-Americon 2, which is basically the WorldCon. It was the local name of the WorldCon convention, and I was the moderator for the Afrofuturism panel there, and it was quite the lineup. We had Johnny Brown, who is an academic from, I think, the University of California system. Had an interesting guy.
Yeah, he's in San Diego.
Right, and Dr. Nick Wood, who is a South African, a white South African who writes mixed race Afrofuturism type stories, which are in some places they're censored over there. Then I had Bill Campbell, who's a publisher, and Cerise Rainey Murphy, she's actually out and about doing a number of things, but she's also known for her writing. And Afrofuturism is being taken seriously, which is why I'm glad that you did the scholarly part, because by coaching it in scholarly terms, you do two things. The first thing is you are able to quantify the legitimacy of it as a movement, a genre, and a style of creativity. And second of all, putting it together as a scholarly endeavor also reduces the tendencies and the nonsense for people who want to try to own the term, which is one of the dumbest things in the world. You know, people want to be the gatekeepers for Afrofuturism, and I have a serious problem with that. You probably do too. So by presenting it the way you did, I think that that's a great grounding for not only the discussion, but for helping the inclusive nature in terms of transmedia. You know, you've got music, you've got short stories, you've got novels, you've got movies, you've got art, you've got, sculpture, all of that for Afrofuturism. And, oh, no, we just lost him. He just hung up or got disconnected. Well, I'll try to talk. I know it's hard. I know it's hard for you guys to imagine me going on and on and on. But to continue what I was talking about, you have people who try to be gatekeepers of any kind of popular movement and try to grab ownership. And I like when someone can put down scholarly roots about something. Okay, looks like. Are you back, Reynaldo?
Hello?
Yeah. Anyway,
Hello?
I was filling. I was filling while you were gone, and I was explaining why.
Yeah. No, this is what I would say when you're talking about and here's where the struggle. I said this spring at a conference that we had in Jackson, Mississippi, where a lot of the contributors for the volume were there, and we've had a serious ongoing discussion about where Afrofuturism was going the last 3 years. At first, at two conference meetings that we had out in Los Angeles at Loyola Marymount that were co-organized by John Jennings and Adila Funama. And then this spring at Jackson State University, we also had a conference down there organized by Rico Chapman and John Jennings. And one of the things I said last year that I thought the future of Afrofuturism was really going to be outside of America in terms of its development. Because one of the things, as people who've read the second volume know, I made the assertion that I thought primarily here in the States that some people might try and keep it kind of artsy, craftsy, or, in terms of just thinking it in terms of comics and music and art criticism and some things like that. But, I thought countries over, whether they're in Africa or in the Caribbean, because they can kind of control their own educational systems, can start looking at this in relation to engineering and military science. And so that's why I said I've made the statement last year that the future of it was outside of the United States, even though it might have it gets a lot of it started here. But and the other thing, and I make that argument in the opening of my introduction, I know not all the South Africans necessarily feel about Afrofuturism as you saying Nick Wood might have articulated, because one of the things I argue about Afrofuturism is now it's become a Pan-African movement now, in terms of, especially in with some of the creative people that are doing stuff, where they're over in East Africa and Kenya, and it's drawing more attention in a lot of the other English-speaking African countries. and so now, and it's taking on different kind of twists and turns depending on where it comes from, how people use it. For example, we just did our Black Speculative Art Movement convention up in Toronto last weekend, talking about this stuff, and plus the idea of the Black Speculative. And, you know, my Caribbean brothers and sisters, they're going to have a different spin on it too, you know. And so that's what's interesting about it. And I've always said that, you know, Afrofuturism will kind of take on the character or in relation to the geography or where people are writing from. And so that's one of the interesting things about it.
And the other part about it is, you know, we, like this show enjoys kind of a strange, we have people, you know, like you mentioned, the person from Denmark calling in to check you out. We have a semi-regular listener from Kenya. We have listeners from the islands. And one of the things that a lot of people, you know, your point is well taken, a lot of people in America think is that Afrofuturism has to do with, you know, African-American endeavor, creative endeavor just in this country, and that's just not so. I mean, the roots are much, much wider than that. Oh, well, our guest from Kenya is here in the chat room right now. So let's learn a little bit about you, because I mean we're going to talk about your work and everything. I'm curious, where did you grow up?
Well, actually, I was born in Okinawa, Japan. My out of a military family.
Sure.
And so I was a military kid, you know, early in life, you know, growing up on Air Force bases. But by the time I get to middle school age, we relocated to the Washington D.C. area, and I finished high school there. My father was a university administrator, and my mother worked as a librarian. Then after high school, I went to college for a year, and then I joined the United States Marine Corps. You know, just at as you know how young people, you want to see some of the world. And then after you go and deal with some drill sergeants and some other things, you know, college starts looking pretty good. So I went back to the college, Jackson State, and finished college there in the early 90s. And then I went to graduate school at Oklahoma State and got my master's in communications. And after I finished at Oklahoma State, I was accepted into the doctoral program at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. And I collected and did my early research, because before I got into Afrofuturism, I was primarily known as kind of like a Black Power studies scholar based on my research on the Black Panther Party. And that was how I got to really meet a lot of the original members of the Black Panther Party, and attended different conferences to that extent. And so a lot of my early work was primarily on the Black Panther Party, or what they would call Black Power studies, in the middle of the last decade. And it was several years ago when I was writing and doing some work on Malefia Santi's work on Afrocentricity, where I had, in the past, I had been somewhat aware of Afrofuturism, but it wasn't a research focus at that time. And it was from looking at Asante's work and some of the work that I had done in communications theory back in the 90s, where I then made my turn into Afrofuturism, you know, kind of coming at it back through communication theory that was done, and systems theory that was done in the 20th century. And that's where my disciplinary background comes at, where I bring my understanding of Afrofuturism primarily as a communications and rhetoric scholar.
Okay, so, and I'm glad you took a breath while you were telling us all of that. And so, So do you consider and you did mention that you've got some creative writing behind you, or you have some creative content behind you that you're going to bring out later. But as you were going along, were you looking at kind of like the perspective on not necessarily Afrofuturism, but intercultural and cultural studies from an academic perspective, or were you looking at them also, in a kind of a research for later creative work vein? I mean, how did all that parse out as you were growing up and going through, undergrad, graduate, and PhD?
Okay, let me see. Oh, man, okay. Well, I remember that if you talk about what your life experiences bring you to this, I remember as a kid in the 70s, my generation, we're the ones that are a product of like busing and integration in the 70s. And, and I was a part of that generation where your parents would have that talk with you to kind of prepare you for the larger society.
Yep.
And so I was prepared, where the first time I was called a nigger. I wasn't totally cut off. I remember, I often share with my friends sometimes, I remember the first time I got spat on. And I remember the boy spitting on me in middle school, and I turned around and hit him in the face as hard as I could hit him. And I remember my black music teacher, who was the only black teacher at the school, saw me, and she didn't do anything. She just hurried up and got me in the room, and I was wondering why she didn't send me to the office. So I guess she felt that what I did to the other gentleman was justified in terms of what happened. And so that was probably, and that's where I've thought about this relationship between science and race. It was introduced in middle school because I remember they used to have what was called back then, I don't know if they still call it that, a TAG program, Talented and Gifted. And
they're called different things in different school systems, but I understand it, the tracking. Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember they took me away. I took a test, and it was I forget the name of it, but it was supposed to measure my intelligence quotient. Well,
okay.
I scored higher than normal, and so then they put me in this class where I was the only black male in there. And I remember there was one black girl and everybody else was white. And so the other thing I remember about science in middle school was when I'm sitting in those classes as the only black kid, I'll never forget my biology teacher when we got onto the topic of genetics. And a white kid asked the question, well, what happens if you mix a black person with a white person? And I remember the teacher stopped talking and said, well, I don't know what happens. Why don't we ask Ray Anderson, referring to me? And my mother is not white, but she's very fair. And sure. I remember at the time that it didn't make any sense, but I remember I felt kind of powerless not to do anything about it, Right. And I remember I gave him some kind of insolent response, which some of my students in the class kind of giggled, and I was sent. And I wasn't sent to the office, but I remember after that. I remember the gentleman's name was Mr. Holland. And I never forgot that in middle school in terms of this relationship between race and science, coming into awareness. And at that time, I'm also really into comic books, with my heroes being people like Power Man or Black Panther at the time, because that's pretty much all we had to choose from. Sure. And so, that's by the time I would say where then it kind of this idea of comic books and fantasy, because I was also a fan of Tolkien at the time, reading The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings.
Right.
Also reading Heinlein and Asimov in terms of sci-fi at the time, along with, Power Man and some of the, and then of course the autobiography of Malcolm X. And so I ended up in the Marine Corps, and I think when I'm in the Marine Corps, where I think for me it becomes politically solidified in terms of how it would influence what kind of scholar I would become, is when I was in the Marine Corps. We were in the Philippines, and we were at Subic Bay, and I remember leaving the base because there was a little girl, I remember at the time, she was probably about 5 or 6 years old, out selling candy, and I used to see her out there, and I'd worry about her, and I'd buy up all her candy so she could go home. And I remember crossing the bridge one day, and then what you had between the base at that time was an open kind of sewage canal between the base and the town of Olongapo, and we called it Shit River. And I remember crossing the bridge behind some sailors at the time, and I'll never forget the sight of American servicemen taking the change out of their pockets and throwing it into the canal, making little Filipino children jump in this sewage canal just to get quarters, And that was probably really in terms, I'd say it was maybe an ideological turning point, for me, because I remember at that time, that's when a lot of the guys, the black servicemen on the ship, were listening to Public Enemy. And so, next step after that is college. And, being a student leader on campus. And then the natural transition after that was, after graduation, going to graduate school. And when I was in graduate school, we, at Oklahoma State, me, my classmate, and others, we organized some of the students there to participate in the Million Man March. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I remember about the Million Man March, we frequently talked about prior to the march that, there was some controversy about, whether we should support Farrakhan because of what the Nation of Islam had done to Malcolm. And I remember it wasn't until Betty Shabazz's daughter was arrested, and then Betty Shabazz, I guess, kind of symbolically makes up with Farrakhan that, at least the students, we said, okay, I guess, since if the widow is saying it's all right, I guess, it's okay to support it. And wow. So
see, we grew up in similar times. I'm a little bit older than you are. Yeah. And of course, I lived in Hyde Park. So, right there, you've got the Elijah Muhammad's compound. They have a compound in Hyde Park. Well, actually, it's in Kenwood. Yeah. At the time, Muhammad Ali had that great house on Woodlawn, which I almost bought after it had been vacant for a bunch of years, but an anesthesiologist bought it and put a couple of $1 million in it, which is good because I couldn't have done that. But that was a, and then when you talk about the Black Panthers, you talk about the things that happened in Chicago, it sounds to me like many of your influences were definitely directly related to, the things that are going on in society at that time, plus the sorts of things that you experienced as a man of color too. And let me ask you this. Now, when you write, when you create, obviously we are the sum of our experiences, and we're the sum of our, so many things, that we go through in life. Are you bringing that to your creative writing?
Yes. It's one of the things, like I lectured to my students in my lecture the other night. I don't write to be accepted. I write what I feel, and even though it has an intellectual framework that I'm writing from, I know that I'm writing from a particular tradition. Right. So I'm aware of my tradition that I'm writing from. And so when I write or create, I don't care if it's even particularly popular. You know, I'd say I write to please myself.
Right.
You know, first. And if other people like it, that's fine. And if they don't understand it, maybe they'll catch on later. You know, I'm curious. Even though I have the book on Afrofuturism now. One of my articles, you know, where I'm kind of that I have that'll be coming out soon in another book where I'm kind of critical of Barack Obama's foreign policy in relation to Africa. You know, I don't know if some of my Afrofuturist fans will like me as well after that. But, you know, that's how I always think of my Afrofuturism is political. And so, and plus, in the interest of disclosure, I know I'm influenced some by my father. When he was at Jackson State, I'm second generation, he was one of the 5 young men or finalists who was supposed to be selected to integrate Ole Miss. And I don't know why the gentleman's name escapes me right now, but they picked the other guy who's well known for integrating Ole Miss because he was a Korean War veteran, and they figured he would be able to take the abuse. And my mom, who later remarried her husband, his family, he was a close friend of Medgar Evers. And was supposed to go fishing with Medgar Evers the weekend he was assassinated down in Mississippi. So, you know, when you grow up hearing those type of stories related to the civil rights movement, so I'm not surprised I write the way I write. And after going to graduate school and meeting members of the Black Panther Party, some incarcerated, I know one who it was very sad going to his funeral, his wake that we had for him this spring up in Nebraska, Mondo Walanga, who was also known as David Rice. He was also an artist. And one of the things I admired about David, or Mondo, for when he went to jail in 71, what I admire about a lot of those guys, they never apologized for the actions that they had to take at the time when they were engaged in what they call the Black Revolution, you know, from 68 to 71. And so actually meeting people who are passionate politics, write and create art passionately, I've been very fortunate to meet those type of people over the course of my career.
Sure. And okay, so I mean, you mentioned earlier that you read through at least half of Discovery, which is my book. My writing is suggested by social justice. All of my writing has been, with the exception of the short stories. The short stories are more like the Twilight Zone and Outer Limits and things like that. But what I do, my tendency is to take today's culture, today's society, today's mindsets, and expose them to a different kind of light. The what if factor. Someone said my first book was a cross between Michael Crichton and Robert Ludlum. The Michael Crichton part is absolutely true. I want to talk about today's society. I want to talk about how blacks and whites deal with each other today, but through through telling a story that's got a speculative element that allows me to play with things. Yeah. And so that's important to me because I ain't happy either with the way things are going. And I have, I'm upset with, I'm kind of like Patrice O'Neill. I'm upset with Barack Obama because I figured by now I'd have a white slave, and I don't. And so, he completely let me down. I was thinking, well, maybe this is our shot. But you know what I'm saying? I mean, in totality, in toto,
Hello?
All right. Hello, everyone. We seem to have had a little technical difficulty here, and a couple of calls were dropped, but we're in the process of getting both individuals back on the line.
Yeah, that's the first time I've been dropped in a long time. You back, Reynaldo?
Well, hey, William.
Yeah.
I would say when I read your book, I always think of the tradition you're writing in. I know they say Crichton and Ludlow. Yeah, I could see some of that. But I saw you also kind of see a little bit of Martin Delaney in what you're writing about. And you know,
mean
when he
Samuel?
Pardon? No, Martin
Delaney?
Martin Delaney, who wrote the book Blake back in the middle of the 19th century.
Oh, okay.
And then I'm talking about, and then maybe Schuyler's Black Empire, you know, and some of the writers like that, because one of the things, I mean, I can see the Crichton part in terms of you looking at those relationship aspects of it,
right?
And so I can see all that in Dark Side. Like I said, I'm only halfway through it right now, and I have to get the other ones. But you know, there are, as I was in a discussion recently, you know, you're in a tradition that really kind of been that went since the late 1850s. You know, whether it's Delaney, Francis Harper, up into Du Bois with the Comets. And you know, we actually have over 150-year tradition of writing these kind of stories, even though it's like the mainstream is kind of just now starting to notice them, you know. And so yeah, that's kind of how I see your work. You're a part of a tradition.
Wow, you know, first of all, you flatter me greatly. And I mean that because, you know, for me, I wrote a story and I wanted to write a good story. I wanted to write a story that had sociological significance and be a good-ass story. And I wanted to write it in the vein of, you know, the golden age of science fiction. So, you know, I had so many things going on in terms of the creative process, and it was the first book that I ever wrote. So again, I didn't know a damn thing about writing a book.
Yeah.
You flatter me to tell me that it did turn out well, and you know other people have told me that, and I'm now starting to believe that. But the need, you know, I finished a novel this summer that I'm having a hard time getting published on my part. Because what it does is it tells a story of what it takes to make white cops stop killing innocent and unarmed black folks. And
okay.
It's according to my beta readers, it's a great story. It's a very compelling novel. But if I publish it in my own name, the chances are a month later I'm going to be shot by some crazy-ass cracker. And that, well, to say that, you're absolutely right. You know, you want to laugh at that. And everybody says to me, well, we hope that doesn't happen. But you know that it will. And so I really like me being alive. So, you know, I got to think about a way to get that out there because it's timely and it's significant, and it, honest to God, tells a story of exactly how to make this stuff stop in just a matter of weeks. I'm like
Now I'll tell you what. Now the original Black Panther Party found a way to make it stop, and they didn't walk around talking about hands up and this other stuff, you know. And that's why
I
all
can't
those
breathe.
laws,
yeah,
and I can't breathe. They did it. They paid the price, but they did it. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, all those laws happened in the 70s that later get repealed a generation later. But there is a way of making it stop, you know. And so I think what some of the young people have done at this point and bring it to attention, and it's fine. But I think with all the tension, especially now, you have a lot of, I think, 2 science fiction novels that kind of predict how our country is going on now. I always look at 2 writers right now, Walter Mosley's Futureland, right, and Octavia Butler's work around Parable of the Sower.
You know, I didn't even think of that. Yes, I have to agree.
Yeah, they kind of forecasted what was happening. So you know, and and I was in a talk recently when I was in Detroit at the MechaCon convention that Maya Williams, who's my co-founder of the Blackspeculative art movement, that she had, and I ran into some people that talk about this tension in Afrofuturist writing, whether it's between dystopia or utopia. And I talked about, well, I'm kind of like, since I'm kind of writing for more of a dark space right now, I guess I lean more towards the dystopian because I tend to look at reality as it is. And I think that, and some people, and I think that we're going to have to go through some things first before we get to the other side. And I think no matter who wins the election next week, the other side's not going to be happy. And I think they're going to, it's going to take us in another direction, either or. I think now this is where I also lean into what I would tell somebody who's interested in writing sci-fi now, if they want to do it related to the political moment. Go and look at some of the work that's being done by, professional futurists, because some of the professional futurists have basically said for the next 10 years or so, till the middle of the next decade, the U.S. is going to experience a lot of political gridlock, okay? And so that's why some of the people that have the ability to pay for professional futurist forecasting, they already kind of know what's going to happen. And people that just watch the regular news and don't have any money, that's who they kind of play with, But people who have money, they've already kind of pretty much forecasted how they can always make it a win-win situation for themselves over the next 10 years. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of seesaw back and forth gridlock for the next decade. And so,
one interesting thing that just developed over the last 8 days is the forecast that Democrats are going to regain the Senate. Okay, and what makes that so damn important is because the next president in one term is probably going to appoint 3 Supreme Court justices, or 2 if let's say Clinton is elected and she goes with Obama's nominee, then she also will probably do 2 more, Justice Kennedy. And Ruth Bader Ginsburg says she's going to hold on until she dies, until there's a Democratic president, and then she'll probably resign. Now, what makes that so significant is if Clinton is elected, she's going to appoint probably three justices and change the balance from conservatives to conservative Republicans to liberal Democrats on the Supreme Court. That's going to have a really significant effect on what goes on in this country. I mean, more so than people suspect. Let's just take one decision, Citizens United, where Justice Scalia said he couldn't possibly imagine that money would have that much influence over an election. If citizens, that money, equaling free speech would never reach the level where it would be a threat to our democracy. And so those are the kinds of things that I look at when I write. What's going to happen? What's likely to happen? How are people going to behave? And look at what we have found out. We have found out that about 35% of, 35% of the whites in this country are so xenophobic, misogynistic, and racist. And we kind of forgot that. We forgot that because it was out of style, because they were quiet, because they stayed in the background. They didn't say much. Of course, you had your white supremacists, and you had, some, one or two or a handful of serious misogynists. And then, of course, the xenophobia, that was couched in other terms. Well, they're going to take your job, this, that, and the other thing. And so when you look at the political landscape, you're absolutely right. It is rife. It is fertile ground for the kind of writing, and we could just call it Afrofuturist, we could call it speculative fiction, we could call it just about anything, but I think it's extremely fertile ground to start talking about society like Heinlein did during the Golden Age. What do you think?
I would agree with that. The thing is, some people, when you think of something like Storm Ship Troopers,
right?
That's kind of I see Trump is more like in the vision of Heinlein, And,
well, Heinlein was a fascist. I mean, let's not mince words. He was a fascist. So, a lot of people may not have read that into it, but even in his kids' books, like Farnham's Freehold and whatever that little girl book was, I forget what it was. You're absolutely right. Trump does present in that mold, and when one of the precepts of Stormship Troopers was, you did not get to vote unless you had done military service. And that's pretty. Go ahead.
Yeah, and so that's why I think right now, what's making Afrofuturism important is some of the people I've worked with on projects and organizing, in particular, or one of the discussions I had with John Jennings, I said, we're doing this work. This is going to be for a fight over the black imagination. Okay? Because the thing is, once you impact somebody's imagination, they'll find a way to make it become a material reality. Once you've sparked their imagination, So, whether, in terms of, and let me give you an example. H.G. Wells wrote a book over 100 years ago talking about the future in America. And H.G. Wells was not only a science fiction writer, he's also a socialist. And in the book, he describes when he met W.B. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington.
Okay.
And he thought that Booker T. Washington was the superior politician when he meets Washington, and that Du Bois had more of an artist's temperament. Whereas I would have probably said Wells was wrong. No, Du Bois was a visionary in terms of him being able to understand the heart of America, which he later illuminates more in his book Dark Water, where you get the short story The Comet, where he becomes more pessimistic about the future of America.
Right.
Right now, I think what you're going to have over the next 10 years are competing visions of in speculative writing over what's going to happen in this country and the world. Now, you talked about the Supreme Court. My thing that trumps the Supreme Court and all these political games we play, I'm looking at things more like climate change and the international financial system as it's currently structured. That's even people who are not speculative people have said that the international financial system as it's currently constructed can't last past 2025. And for example, last year I believe it was in Davos, when they were talking about trends of the future. If it hasn't happened already within the next several years, artificial intelligence or AI, they're going to be board members of corporations and they're going to have a vote.
Sure.
So if you have a corporation, if you don't have an AI as a board member, you're at a competitive disadvantage.
Right.
And so, the AIs are going to have a vote on corporate boards. Within the next 10 years, 10% of all currency will be digital currency. When you think of like the Bitcoin phenomenon, all that stuff, but about 10% of it will be digital within the next several years, since that book was written last year, so it's accelerating. So all of these trends in the next couple of years, the next decade, along with climate change, they're going to make, some of these laws that people pass totally irrelevant. And then we've got to remember that our entire global civilization is only kept together by technology. What happens when some of that stuff, we can no longer easily get that kind of what's the word I'm looking for? The kind of raw materials that it takes to keep that technology sophisticated and inexpensive. That's
right. When we start running out of natural resources in order to sustain our society, you're going to see certain things happen that most people don't think about at all. Let me tell you something that happened in the last decade. I'm trying to think of. No, you know what? Let me think this out. But anyway, let's just say that this one financial institution, and I can't remember. It's a very common one, but they cornered the market on wheat.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I apologize. I have slight aphasia, so sometimes I know something and I can't say it. But this financial concern cornered the market on wheat, jacked up the price, and as a result, millions of people starved because a lot of countries, poorer countries, will spend their money on wheat to give away to their people because they have no other source of food. Mm-hmm. And it was just heartbreaking to see. And as you pointed out, when we start looking at long term, when we look down the road 10, 20, 30 years, climate change is going to be a huge thing because look at how it's affected global food production and potable water availability just in the past generation. I mean, the change has been unbelievable. And so again, that is fodder for stories because, fictional stories can grab the imagination from people a lot better than some damn news report, Yeah,
and that's why I would say, I'm a big fan now of one of my favorite African sci-fi kind of. I think she sometimes uses the word as a magical futurist. She kind of hacks it and puts it together. Is Nnedi Okorafor, and her book. I love her book Lagoon. My daughter loves her book Akata Witch, and the Lagoon by Nnedi Okorafor is kind of like, think of oh my goodness, what was that movie that came out last year that had the beast coming from another dimensions and we had robots big as skyscrapers fighting them?
Pacific Rim.
Yeah, Lagoon is kind of like an African Pacific Rim to a certain extent. That book, if you haven't read it, highly recommend it. It's kind of like where something comes from the ocean and comes into the city of Lagos, Nigeria. It's a very well written story.
Right.
What a lot of African Americans need to know is that even if they don't have a lot of knowledge about Africa, they need to learn more because what's kind of happening out of sight, out of mind. It's kind of like they're using all this police brutality stuff to distract us from what is really going on in terms of geopolitics. Like there are corporations and individuals trying to buy up huge tracts of land in Africa because Africa is really the last place in the world that can be a breadbasket for humanity in terms of its population density and all this. China, I believe now the country of Zimbabwe, their finances are underwritten by China now with the yuan, the Chinese currency. And so this is where I think whatever happens in Africa is ultimately, and in a lot of ways, is similar to what's happening us here in our urban centers, and we need to recognize that. So I'm looking for, over the next 10 years, I'm looking for writers that are going to link those two things together in terms of what's happening. Like, for instance, because, his stuff reads well, but it doesn't touch my heart. And I'm talking about like William Gibson. It reads well, and people like him, but like I like it when the '90s when he comes out with Count Zero and other stuff, and he's obviously influenced by Vodun and African culture and some of the stuff that he uses in the book. I'm really ready for like a somebody who is able to link, say, what happens in what's happening in the inner city of Chicago to say something like in Accra, Ghana. I'm really kind of ready for that in terms of a science fiction format. Somebody might have done it already. Now, I know that I think Kwame Arma, when he wrote the book Osiris Rising in the '90s, Kwame Arma, I think he attempted to do that in a way, but I want to see somebody in this century really link those things together, because when Kwame wrote that book Osiris Rising, there was no African Union. The African diaspora was not designated as the sixth zone of the African Union, and so that's what I'm ready to really bite into now. Somebody with those kind of gifts that can do that. As a way of, as you're saying, politically educating us that, people, they're not going to watch CNN, but they'll read, as I tell my students sometimes, art and literature sometimes can give you deeper insight into a political problem than some of the nonfiction that created the problem.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, these are kind of, in some ways, this is how we're going to have to disseminate this information, because we're putting it in a more accessible medium. And my struggle is, how do you there's the enticement factor. How do you entice a group of people, a race, whatever, women, to pick your group? It doesn't matter. What is the basis for putting together the enticement to get people to do something? And believe it or not, it goes back to marketing acumen. In terms of self, because I'm sorry.
Yeah, I agree with you. You got to know your audience,
right?
And so I write for. So my idea is like even Afrofuturism, it's not for all black folks, because I write for a particular audience of black folk, one, who care about the future, two, they're not, their primary goal is not white validation.
Right.
And they don't care about respectability politics. And there's an audience hungry for that out there for this kind of stuff. And the example I'll give that is quantifiable. When John Jennings and I put together the Unveiling Visions exhibition in New York City that ended back in January. It started last October and ended in January. The thousands upon thousands of people that came through that exhibition in foot traffic to see that exhibition. I mean, buses go through from across New York, go through there, tourists.
Sure.
And then it closed out with the Black Comics exhibition, which turned out to be the largest independent black comic convention in the history of the country. Was there in terms of in its one-day thing. I mean, huge, tens of thousands of people. Now, science fiction, comics, black popular music, and some of this black speculative stuff historically was kind of considered kind of what they might call by intellectuals as lowbrow.
Okay.
You know? But we went in there. We didn't give a damn about fine art, you know, in terms of how we, you know, because both John and I are both graduates of Jackson State. We're not products of some elite, effete Ivy League education.
Okay.
And we are, you know, folks, we just regular folks, you know, in terms of going to some hole-in-the-wall juke joint, where regular folks in terms of people like what they actually like reading, like for example, have you seen the series? They had the Luke Cage series on Netflix yet?
I only happened to get all the episodes and binge watch them to the detriment of many other things like laundry, dishes, and other things at my house.
Remember the scene where he and the black barber are talking about this distinction between reading Walter Mosley and Donald Goines?
Yes.
Well, I'm a fan of Donald Goines.
Right.
He as the young people say, a ratchet kind of death. But I remember Donald Goines is still the best-selling black author of all time in America. He sold more books than James Baldwin, Toni Morris, and any of these people. Because, and you could say he's legitimately the originator of what you would call urban fiction.
Mm-hmm.
With his books, Kenyatta's Last Chance, Black Girl in Trouble, all these kind of books. And so, to a certain extent, I think we're like, if our writing and the art and exhibitions we create are not accessible to everyday people, we've wasted our time, because I'm not writing to and create stuff to be accepted into a salon of people that don't know how to talk to regular folks, and if you want to do the fine stuff, that's fine, okay, but those people, the fine arts people, that's not my audience.
Mm-hmm.
Not writing to be approved of by certain select people who decide these things about books or whatever. I write for a audience, and as long as they like it, I'm happy. That's pretty much all I care about. And there's a big audience out there for this stuff. Whether you write it as a young adult fiction or whatever. That's why I think it's starting really, in a way, this movement is really picking up steam in terms of they're hungry for it and people want to see it.
Right. Hang on a second. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. And as I said before, this is the Friday before Election Day here in Chicago, November 4th, and our special guest tonight is co-editor of Afrofuturism 2.0, Reynaldo Anderson. Let's switch gears for a little bit. I'm a little curious about how you went about soliciting the people who were contributors for Afrofuturism 2.0.
Okay.
If you don't mind.
Okay. Well, I went about soliciting Afrofuturism 2.0. We put the call out. I put a call out. Now, let me think of the call. And it was where I explicitly put in the call that we need to, for Afrofuturism 2.0, I wanted a call first about Afrofuturism, and I wanted it to be linked to Black Studies.
Okay.
And that's how I put the call out. And so I posted it on a lot of email listservs. I then reached out to people that I knew personally that were working on it. So I end up with a range of people, some people that are like tenured professors, some of the people were graduate students.
Mm-hmm.
One of my contributors does not have a college degree, but he's kind of like a Harold Cruz. He's just brilliant and so well read, and has read everything on the topic. He contributes a chapter, so it's kind of like a very eclectic group of people who contribute essays to the volume. And then there were so many people that were interested in it. That's why I ended up having enough essays and interest to generate 2 volumes. So I have some college professors, some people who I would call independent intellectuals,
mm-hmm.
some former musicians. One person a guy with a dual PhD in philosophy and communications who's also a DJ. So I ended up with a very interesting, eclectic group of people, an international group of people from North America, Africa, and Europe who have entering selections into both volumes.
That's pretty cool. And do you anticipate this being an ongoing series? I mean, I don't see any reason why you can't put one, another volume out, several years down the road, and another and another and another, because obviously culture, seriously, worldwide culture is in flux. I mean, it's always going to be changing. I don't mean in flux. I take that back. Not flux like, oh, something's happening, but it is fluid. It does change. There are certain trends that happen. Sometimes there's a historical incident that can have a disproportionately large effect that people can write about, that people can study, that people all of a sudden have a certain awareness of that they did not, before. Assassinations do that, coups in countries do that. Any kind of flight from a country, so, and even the changes that we're expecting, I think the majority of the people think that we're going to have a dystopian future rather than a utopian or at least a better future than what we have, currently today. So all of that being said, I don't see why you can't continue.
Well, it's pretty much this way. I think what's happening. See, Afrofuturism 2.0 is an attempt to capture the culture and technology of, you could say, between 2005 and 2015. Okay. And some of the selections that are going to be in the Black Speculative Arts movement that comes out in the spring, some of that will attempt to capture some of the stuff that's to come, plus some of the stuff that's happening now. And so I think the two books that we will have in that anthology, I've talked to friends. I think they'll be pretty solidly relevant up all the way through 2020, in terms of some of the things that are involved. Like, for instance, Lonnie Brooks' essay that's in the first book that talks about these futurist think tanks and what it's like to be a minority forecaster in a Silicon Valley think tank. And then I have, in Chapter 9 of that book, Esther Jones talks about this relationship between science fiction and medicine and black women. And so that's why I think a lot of the work in the book is going to hold up pretty solidly for, to the end of this decade. But one of the things that we're doing that's coming out of it, because now it's kind of Afrofuturism 2.0, these anthologies are linked to the Black Speculative Art movement, because I wrote a manifesto to that effect earlier this year. And here's how that came about. After I had the manuscript for 2.0 done, I started going to conferences, and last fall I attended a conference called Afrofutures UK in Manchester, England, that was organized by a sister over there named Ifeoma Okoye. And it was over in Manchester. For those people not really grounded in history, that's where Marx and Engels write all of the manifesto related that were very influential in Marxism and communism in Manchester, which was like the origins of the Industrial Revolution in the English-speaking world. And, Manchester, that city is trying to transform into a post-industrial city, and it seems like they've successfully done so. But Manchester was also had where you had the fifth Pan-African Congress meeting, where Africans take over the Pan-African movement away from the diasporan contingent. So while I was in Manchester, I started thinking about these things in terms of these futuristic aspects, and in conversation with people like Ifeoma and others, and what, and in terms of transhumanism and some of these other things. And then I thought it was necessary to begin to organize a movement to address those issues. And so with Ifeoma support, I wrote the Black Speculative Art Movement Manifesto, and published an excerpt of it on Medium. Not the entire thing. I finished the entire thing, but it's going to be published here pretty soon. And
right.
So that's when, after this spring, in conversation with people, I said, I'm just going to go on and launch the Black Speculative Art Movement. And I asked Maya Williams, who I met at the end of Unveiling Visions exhibition in New York. She's a convention organizer with MechaCon, and we had our first Black Speculative Art Movement gathering here in St. Louis, where we're beginning to bring people together that are not only interested in writing about these ideas, but organizing around these ideas and concepts. And then the second, or we call it BSAM for short, we had the second one in Canada recently, and it was a smashing success up in Toronto. And I think the Afro-Canadian Caribbean community is going to really run with it. And next Saturday, we're going to have our third BSAM event up in Philadelphia. And our host up there is Malefia Sante, who is really like the godfather of Afrocentricity in America. The Department of Africology and Africana Studies is gracious enough to host us at Temple University next week. And so we're going to be up there with Rashida Phillips and the Afrofuturist Affair, Black Tribbles, Dark Matters, Danny Simmons, Karamu Kush, and a lot of other artists, Afrofuturists, and scholars there to disseminate and debate these ideas as they kind of mutate into the future. Because what you're seeing now, in Afrofuturism, you're seeing people that are going to talk about, as Esther Jones brings out in Volume 1, you're seeing Afrofuturism and womanism, or black women's thought in terms of how it interacts with Afrofuturism, or black feminism, as you'll see in the second volume. You'll have people now talk about this Afrofuturism. Lancaster Johnson, who's in the second volume, is looking at this in terms of designing an economic model. Dr. Ebony Utley has a chapter in the next book talking about designing love in terms of how do we develop our relationships in relation to this available technology into the future. Dr. Tanisha Taylor has a chapter that focuses on digital humanities, which is she's going to be talking next week in Philadelphia. Damian Scott, who is a trained philosopher, is going to be dealing with this. He's going to talk about, I believe, aspects of analytical philosophy. So the field of philosophy now is starting to take note of Afrofuturism now. So the intellectual debate now is really just getting underway. And what I like about BSAM is it brings together, regular everyday people who like the music, Comic-Con culture, cosplay, and that kind of stuff, and it brings them together and it cross-fertilizes them with the intellectuals who are writing and reading about it. And so so the BSAM movement kind of helps cross-fertilize concepts and ideas in terms of how people think about this stuff, and it's an ongoing thing. There was an article that was just written in Canada talking about it. Written by Amanda Paris, who talked about when BSAM came to Canada last month, that BSAM, or the Black Speculative Arts Movement, is a child of the Harlem Renaissance and the Black Arts Movement and Negritude in terms of as an umbrella concept for people that are, whether you're into Afro-surrealism, black sci-fi, other types of esoterica, or what John Jennings calls the ethno-Gothic, or Afrofuturism, or the Latin version Afrofuturismo. this is an ongoing thing now that's very fluid, and I don't anticipate it solidifying yet for the next, several years. So, yeah, because there's some young people coming up, man, that are graduate students that are really going to be making some great contributions to this stuff.
When you talk about that, first of all, I don't think you can disconnect each one of those movements from all the rest, because remember, they're well, and I'm not arguing with you really, certainly not intellectually, but my feeling is, Black folks in America are like any other. Let's talk about it. That the analog would be an individual, and an individual is the sum of their existence and the sum of their nurturing.
Yeah.
And so when you look at when you look at the Harlem Renaissance, when you look at the same period slightly later here in Chicago, the Black intellectual movement here in Chicago. When you look at in any of all of those movements, and when you're talking about them remember, in 3 years we will have only been here for 400 years.
Yeah.
So as an invention 397 years ago, and then looking at the evolution and the evolving of exactly what Black culture has been and its corresponding influence on greater American culture, I think that we're looking at a revolution, and the reason why I say that is because revolution, is based on the word revolve, and when you're revolving, you're moving forward, or moving backward, but you're moving. It's a constant movement. So, again, in terms of looking at what can excite young people into considering things that they normally would not or may not have been exposed to through creative writing, through art, through music. Well, look at how much music has influenced kids. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh.
So you take all of those different artistic memes, and all of them contribute to the whole, I think, in a way that is more significant, far more significant than not, because we have a shared experience. If you want to talk about just one difference between us and whites, it's like the experience that Blacks have with law enforcement than whites have with law enforcement. And whites can't understand, they cannot conceptually understand why we respond the way we do, why we feel the way we do, why we talk the way we do about that, because they don't have the same experience. And so I look at what you're doing is brilliant. Being able to quantify that from people who are living or studying these different movements and what their social significance and cultural significance is now and what it may lead to in the future, I think that's something that rises to the level of almost required reading in school for Black high school and college students. That's me.
Mhm. Well, it's funny. What was it? Andrew Rollins told me when he saw the completed thing. He said that Afrofuturism 2.0 was going to be the equivalent of this generation's what Alan Locke wrote when it was called The New Negro.
Oh, yes, yes.
In terms of what Afrofuturism 2.0, it captures a post-civil rights moment. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the things I said in a lecture once that Afrofuturism, if it doesn't do anything else, it's going to kill the slave in you, and this is going to kill the master in them. In terms of that old, what they call the master-slave dialectic.
Sure.
And the other thing, I think that now that it's out there now, it can't be stopped. You know, it may be possibly co-opted because you'll have a lot of people saying they're doing something Afrofuturistic. And I think what I say in a talk early this spring, I told people you're going to see a lot of bootleg futurism out there. Because one of the things I've said is there's no Africa in your futurism. It's not Afrofuturism. You're doing somebody else's futurism.
Okay.
So if you don't try and at least study some of the history of Africa, at least what's happened the last 50 years, you're kind of doing a disservice to Afrofuturism.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to learn more about how our politics and a lot of what we do here is intertwined with what happens over there. Also, it's not going to just necessarily be a black-white thing because you have Chicana futurism. You have there was a book that's been out recently that's called Techno-Orientalism. You have Gulf futurism in terms of how Arabs are looking at some of these concepts. There was a review of my book, of the book 2.0, done over in Israel by the Tohu magazine, and they're looking at Afrofuturism and in terms of maybe how the Palestinians are looking at it, you know. And I have been invited to go over to Israel to talk about these things. So I'll be talking about the Blackspeculative art in Israel next year, and probably when because we're going to have another BSAM convention in Texas in February the 18th at Prairie View A&M University. Well, I'll bring up this idea of this and talk about Chicana futurism because the idea of looking at your future through this Eurocentric lens is dead on arrival now for this younger generation. You know, well, the idea of going into the future and looking at stuff in the future in a couple hundred years where everybody looks like a Caucasian and everybody's speaking English and minorities are just the sidekick, that's over. You know, and so we're just at the beginning. We're in the really first serious stages of this stuff that's going to occur over the next decade.
And something very important that happened 8 years ago, the election and the re-election of Barack Obama just completely destroyed any notion of white exceptionalism for all times. First of all, white exceptionalism was something that was constantly embedded into American culture. And look, I don't want to talk about politics, but just by his election and re-election, you know, to proving that he was the best choice for that job.
Well, I'm going to tell you what.
Go ahead.
Some of what Obama did contributed to this current wave of Afrofuturism coming out. And I would say a lot of these people, they're dissatisfied with his limitations. And I think the beginning of the end of what impacted how people, you remember the incident that happened with Henry Louis Gates, Beergate.
Right.
Where you had this Harvard-educated intellectual basically be profiled and harassed by a white police officer.
Wasn't he arrested?
Yeah, he's arrested.
Or at least he was arrested, handcuffed and arrested, and had to do the perp walk for trying to get in his own house.
Yes. And it got so overheated, they have to come out to the White House to do a beer gate, to talk over a beer. Now, to me, I was disappointed in the response because if I'd have been the president, I'd have probably told the police, like Lyndon B. Johnson, get the F out, and I don't really care about your feelings. But, that was a thing where I think the cold water was dashed over, or people was brought to reality that a simple beat cop can still impact you in terms of how you behave, even if you're the president of the United States or a highly trained African-American intellectual at an Ivy League school. That I'd say was the beginning of it. So I'm like saying, oh, man, that means, it still doesn't matter because, you can't imagine George Bush or anybody else having to do that stuff. And so that,
right.
I would say, is the beginning. But then I'd say the Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown stuff brought it all to a head, for the average person. But I'll never forget what one of my students said back in 2008, before she, even after Obama got elected. She said, Dr. Anderson, so what if he's elected? It's not stopping these police from, beating us upside our head,
Right, right.
And this is like within a week after the election. The young people already got it after the election. They saw it, but too many people that were like my parents' generation, they were so caught up with seeing a person being president. And because I'm telling you, to these people in their 20s on down, being president, it's really not that, Obama is not that big of a deal. They look at it as, it's not that big of a deal for people under 30, So, like my kids have grown up seeing them in there, so they probably think that's something that's supposed to happen normally if you're qualified. So I'd say the things he was not able to get accomplished have really kind of helped fuel. Our imagination is bigger than what he was talking about. Change you can believe in. I mean, I can think of stuff that's pretty big that I would call change that he didn't even come close to dealing with. I mean, he was in office 8 years and he never submitted a criminal justice reform bill. And so for poor blacks in the inner city, that's a big deal, decriminalizing all that crap that was passed under the Clintons and left pretty much intact up to this point. So that's that was a bit. That's a lot on his record, And
yeah, but if we're going to be entirely fair, okay, and I'm like you. in a lot of ways, he did disappoint me. I made the joke, but really, by this time, I thought I'd have a white slave. And I'm really disappointed that he did not get me one. But in terms of legislation, in terms of affecting common culture, he has had every possible stonewall tactic used on him to prevent him from doing just that. All right, we have a white establishment hanging on by its toenails because in 20 years they're going to become a minority. All right. And they are terrified of that. And this is common psychology. When you try to figure out what someone's going to do to you because you think some dirt has been done, the first thing you think of is what you would do to them in the same circumstance. So you have a whole class of white folks out there knowing what they have done to non-whites in this country, and they're terrified. They're terrified that that's what's going to happen to them when they become a minority. And look at how hard they're fighting. You got the KKK glomming on to the Republican nominee or candidate. The sickness in this country is legion. And I'll be honest with you, I don't think he could have done any more than he did in this 8 years. He could submit a bill, he could submit a budget, he could, he did what he could after the second election with executive orders, because there was no legislation that he was ever going to get past Congress, and that's a tough one. That's a tough one. Our people think that our president has a lot of power, and they really do not.
No, I understand that. But
I know, but they're so hemmed in. And let me just say this one last thing. One thing that everybody forgot, okay, is that when Barack Obama was running for president, he said if he gets elected, he is going to be the president of all Americans. All right.
Yeah.
So,
and you know what? Everybody has to say that, and here's why I don't care about that statement. All right.
Okay.
Every other constituency goes and fights for their interests, for what they want. They don't suspend their interest in the interest of some rhetoric saying I'm going to be the president of everybody. Whether it's a corporate interest or some other minority interest, they don't back down off of what they want simply because the president says something. I don't really care that he said he's going to be the president of anybody. I'm just saying to get 90-something% of our vote, I basically gave him a C+ as president. And I'm not going to cut him any slack because he asked for the job, okay? So if you employ somebody and you vote for him to do something for you, do you cut him some slack? Well, you could only half-ass do a good job on my driveway, but, because the person discriminated you getting your supplies, I'll look over that, he promised a lot. And I'm just saying, so that president of everybody stuff doesn't really wash with me. But the thing is, I think the people who are so-called leaders and even artistic people in our community didn't call him out on it. It's like they gave him a pass, And my thing is, and that's why a lot of the young people now, rightfully so, after Ferguson, they don't listen to the civil rights establishment and all these other people because, hey, those people, they got what they wanted. They basically, in return for getting people to vote Democrat or whatever, they get whatever the political goodies are. But for young people, young black millennials in this country that deal with the harassment, the debt, and joblessness, I don't really think he delivered that much. And they have a right to be angry. And I think they were the ones that were at the heart, as you know, they were at the, my students participated in the Ferguson unrest, in the racial market. I said my students participated in the Ferguson unrest or rebellion. Michael Brown's uncle was in my class that semester. I'll never forget, I had to let him out of class a lot because he was there the day Mike Brown was killed. And he basically was experiencing post-traumatic stress syndrome. And so, some of my students, they got shot with rubber bullets. So I don't really give a damn about his feelings, about what he wasn't able to do. I'm like, first of all, he never came to St. Louis to overlook the situation. He said he delegated it to other people. And most of the time when he comes to talk to us, it's about, it's all about if we just make our behavior better, we'll get a better outcome. Now, no other community would accept that in the face of that. So I don't give them a pass for that. And that's why they're having such a hard time solidifying the black vote for next week, is because, they're trying to say that people aren't turning out because it's not a black president. No, a lot of people aren't turning out, or they're not excited because of the shortcomings of what they got to vote for. And even the president of an organization that I belong to here, prominent civic society local member, saying, look, these people, this party that we vote for a lot, they're going to have to start coming a lot better. I mean, and these people that are under, these millennials, they're not as loyal to this stuff as the way our generation is, or our parents or whatever. They're going to seriously start looking at some things. And then, and it's not a coincidence that a lot of the people are that same generation are into Afrofuturism. They're looking for new concepts and ideas to help interpret this reality.
Yes, but one thing that they have to do, these young people have to do, and I will call their asses on the carpet every single time I see it. If you're going to bitch about something, if you're unhappy about something, then you have to do something about it. And it's more than just voting. Why don't you run for office? Why don't you run for a local, some local political office and exact that change? Because, these old-ass white folks who are running this country have been around for a good long time, and we haven't done enough to recycle these people and put some people in who will do the things that we want to have done, okay? And what's the reason behind that? Well, the reason behind that is we got a whole lot of people who are invested in the status quo, and they have an enormous amount of money in order to maintain the status quo. So, yes, young folks are upset, and rightly so, because they're not going to have it better than their parents. But you know what? They can get off their asses and start doing something about it. I'm really tired of hearing the complaints because it does take a significant amount of effort to make that kind of change. And so where are the people who are going to put that significant amount of effort?
Yeah.
Where are the analogs to the people who marched and got hit with bricks or shot or whatever? I don't see that in the young people.
Well, I'll tell you where it is. Right now, amongst that generation, there's a divide. Some of those young people will be co-opted, as the older generation was. And also... and someone has to explain it to them, some of the previous advancement was stopped because this system assassinated several of our best leaders. The other thing is So there's an internal struggle now amongst this younger generation and they're studying it night and day, trying to figure out how they're going to come to grips with this stuff. And some are going to take the pieces of silver, okay, because
that's true.
You know, and so they're right now what they're learning to do right now. It's not just complaining; they're learning to distinguish between being an agent of change, or you just want to be the new face behind the microphone and call that change.
Yeah.
And
but
so
the cool part about it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And so that's what they're learning to distinguish now is the simple thing that you learned in the movie with the Watergate thing: follow the money. And so now, so they're becoming much, much better at following the money in terms of, okay, if this person is saying this, where are they getting their money from? And once they determine that, and once they find out that they've been tricked or something, they don't go back. You know, they don't. They have a short fuse. They're not going to give you a second opportunity. So if you present yourself as an agent of change, and that's why so many young people, I think, were attracted to the Bernie Sanders message this year. That was the beginning of it. Or as some people, as a friend of mine says, that the Bernie Sanders campaign was just the Occupy Wall Street people going to the polls. Okay? And that generation is just going to get stronger. And the old guard, you know, simply by attrition and them passing away, is going to get weaker year by year by year. Because remember, it won't be until 2018 that even all the millennials are eligible to vote yet. So
well,
if you have a good, and that might be, that's a good thing. And if you're talking about a utopia, if only millennials were allowed to vote, we probably would have socialism in this country. You know, and so if only millennials could vote right now, as they did a demographic, if only women could vote right now and no men could vote in the country, Hillary Clinton would carry every state except maybe 2. And so, so there's going to be change. The only argument I'd have with it, you know, when you talk about getting into science fiction and forecasting, all this, my only thing that I think about, is it going to happen fast enough and on a scale enough to maintain some semblance of a civic society and in terms of still having a nation? Because right now, if you run the numbers, it's going to be touch and go, and I wouldn't necessarily bet on it. But like you said, something may happen that really jacks people into getting behind some concepts or ideas to where we can still have a nation. But right now, if you talk about, I always tell people, you know, I remember when I saw it in the service, when you don't have enough water, enough food, and enough of stuff that it takes to live, things get ugly. People don't hold hands and get along together. And you kind of see in the early beginnings of that. Look at how they did our people in Flint, Michigan, you know. And so the deterioration of all these systems that help maintain our civilization, you know, whether it's simple as getting clean water. I mean, a lot of our water now, whether it's through fracking and all these other things, is not even fit to consume or drink. So, yeah, right now, you know, these 18 to 21-year-olds, they have some inarticulate rage at the moment because they've not been educated to participate in the real problems that face them now in the society. And that's part of the frustration. And really, the older people shouldn't get mad at them. You know, it was old people that wrecked Wall Street. And it's all these old people who are going to get all the good benefits based upon tax abatements and all these other things to take advantage of. So, you know, that stuff still takes money. What's going to happen is some people from our generation are going to have to see it in their own enlightened self-interest to help these young people out, you know, in terms of helping them and giving them access to get their art out, helping them develop their voice and mentor some of them in the game, you know, because what happens, a lot of people, even in our generation, man, we don't help younger people get along. We basically kind of in it for ourselves and, you know, and screw the rest. And they're not, you know, all this stuff about mentorship, you know, and that's really a struggle in our community. And you see it at some of these cons in terms of whether it's, I don't deal with just racism, you do have some sexism present, okay, in terms of how cons are organized and who gets recognition. And so even in our imaginary literary community, you see things present that can be hostile towards progressive kinds of ideas or thought. And so, And a lot of times artists are the hardest people to organize because a lot of times they're so invested in their vision, they never really learn how to lead or organize. I mean, they can't even organize a voter registration rally.
It's like herding cats.
Yeah, like I tell people, as a chair of a department, my job is herding cats because it's hard to get instructors and academics to agree on things. So it's very, very difficult. But sometimes historical moments happen where you can reach a consensus, and I think with the Black speculative arts movement that's going on now, it's kind of like we got people that think different things, but there's a loose consensus that we need to be doing this at this moment in time to influence the thinking in our community, and we can't depend on outsiders to do it, not bureaucrats, not grant hustlers, and not these other things. We have to do it. We, through our collective art and creativity, have to offer our people an alternative vision.
Well, yeah, but that's the brilliance of what you're doing. You're right there, in the mix of it. First of all, you're an educator. All right, so you're interacting with these young people all the time, and you're able to at least illustrate linkages between cause and effect that they probably would not discover on their own. So, I mean, the part about educating our young into turning them into an effective force for culture, for change, for improvement, for community, that's huge in the kind of work that you've already done and that you're going to continue doing in the future.
Yeah, I'd agree, but like I said, I'm not going to do it. Who knows how much longer I'll do it. I've talked to people like John and others. I say I want to get to the point where people just invite us to say something and somebody else is doing the work. So,
you get to come by and have the donuts and watch other people do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking forward to that in the next decade. So, and I think there's some younger people now, this art historian, she's in training, getting a PhD, Tiffany Barber, brilliant sister, getting her doctorate in art history. And that's one that comes to mind. And Grace, who wrote in the first volume. You have a lot of great work being written about, for instance, me and Tobias Van Veen, who contributed to my first book. We're doing a very, very serious journal. It's a Canadian journal called Topia, where some of these ideas are going to be expanded, where we're looking at Black politics in the future. And we had an enormous, like a tidal wave of submissions for that, and we're trying to find a home for all these articles. So we can tell that our work now, a lot of the Afrofuturist work is starting to impact scholarly work in the academy now. And we're finding each other via vehicles like the Black Sci-Fi Society and these other Facebook pages. We're finding each other. And one of the things I was telling some of the people that I work with, I said, after 2016, that'll be the first year that I don't know everybody who's doing serious work in this era, because that's how swiftly it's growing. And there's so many people doing it now for dissertations and master's pieces, and a lot of people, like I know a colleague of mine in communication, Aisha Durham, is teaching a class down in South Florida, using work from my text, and Kanitri Jallo down in Texas, she's using the work from the text 2.0 in her class next semester. So you're going to just see a proliferation of these kind of books and this kind of speculative work coming out over the next year or so. So it's not going to slow down anytime soon. And I think you're going to just keep, and it's going to begin to connect with politics in a peculiar kind of way that I can't forecast yet all the way, but I'm starting to see the contours of it emerge. But I think the writing is going to basically revolve around dystopia versus utopia. Okay. Or, sure. Some people might try and use a fancy word like heterotopia or whatever. But right now, in rough terms, Can you imagine a utopian future where we're all holding hands, or is it going to get really, really bad first? Something like Octavia Butler or Walter Mosley wrote about in Futureland. And like I said, I tend more, and I really like Walter Mosley's Futureland. I recommend that to anybody to read who seems to look at America in the near future, coming out of certain, or with Octavia Butler. And then you're seeing it in the graphic arts. I know John Dennings, Damian Duffy are coming out with a graphic illustration of Kindred next year. I mean, we're getting invited to the White House. Tim Fielder, who works with us, whose work will be in the second volume, he was at the South by Southlawn meeting at the White House just a few weeks ago. So our work is being noticed at the highest levels of society. Now, people are looking at it now, and right now, we're just seeing how it's going to unfold now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Someone in the chat room has a question for you. He said, have you heard of Comiket, which is Japan's largest comic convention organized by volunteers and is all-inclusive for independents and pros? Is that something you're familiar with?
I'm not familiar with that one.
Okay, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
They just wondered. Now, when you look, okay, so you mentioned you're gonna have the art analog to Afrofuturism 2.0 coming out very, very shortly. What comes after that for you? I mean, obviously, I'm guessing you're going to still be teaching and still be trying to.
Well, there's going to be a bunch of stuff coming out. We have the Unveiling Visions catalog will be coming out shortly.
Okay.
The second book, which is called The Blackspeculative Art Movement, which is an anthology with others, that will be out in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
I also have a book coming out that I'm co-authoring. It's dealing with black women and feminism. That will be out. I mean, I'm behind writing that one. I should have finished that 6 months ago, but I'll be dealing with that. It's dealing with the black women and the black Atlantic feminism. That'll be out. And Tim Fielder and I will be working on a project. And plus, I'll be having some of my work appear in some of John Jennings' work, Box of Bones. And that'll be out next spring. So, no, I'm going to continue to make writing contributions and other work, along with organizing BSAM conventions. I would say that I'm going to stay busy. But after next year, I'll probably have to, in terms of writing, to come out with some big body of collecting work. I'll probably take a time off for like a year or so and do some serious reading before I come out. I have some thoughts about what I want to write next, but I might wait a year or two.
Right.
But right now I'm in the middle of a very creative, and I'm in a very creative period, and I just want to kind of, how as a writer you want to get everything out that's inside you.
You want to ride that wave. You want to ride your wave.
Yeah. And my wave, like I said, I think I got about another, a couple years on the wave, and then I'm going to take probably a break for a little while, and then probably come out with something new after that. If I'm, that's kind of what I can see right now. Something else may happen instead of that.
Look at the intellectual collective that you've managed to kind of loosely put together just in the 3 volumes you discussed already. Afrofuturism 2.0, 2.0.2, and the arts one. It seems like very, very fertile ground for a lot of collaborative work as well as your own individual work.
Well, that's one of the things we're talking about. One of the things, John Jennings, we're like the Wu-Tang Clan of Afrofuturism. And so it's one of the things that we're going to have some of our own projects, and then we're going to help other projects. And it's one of the things I explained to John, man. We got to approach a lot of this work the same way a Silicon Valley research team would, And I think one of the reasons it's going well is because a lot of us, we're very secure. We're not worried about where our next paycheck is coming from. And so and so we're able to get a lot of stuff out, and so we have a I think we've been very mature about, handling the success that we're dealing with now. And and one of the things I've always want to stress, like with a younger guy that I'm mentoring up in Canada now, who's in like his mid-20s, mentor the next generation to say, hey, man, I'm not doing this stuff in another 10, 15 years. Hey, participate and you all take over from us. So I'm not. One of the things I've learned from, because I'm an executive board member of the Missouri Arts Council.
Okay.
One of the things I've talked to people in the arts is that I'm not going to get founder syndrome, what I mean by that is because Reynaldo helped co-found something, it's only going to be what I say it's going to be for the next 30 years until I die. I'm like, no, sure. And that's why I think that was what happened to some people who were, they might have come out of the black arts movements of the 70s, in the 60s and 70s. And what I've seen here in the last 10 years, people that create these kind of artistic collective things that were interesting for a couple of decades, and they never let it go. They've never let it breathe and go, and it basically died with them. And it's happened a lot in city after city around the country. And then they'll ask somebody like me or my generation to come and try and save it after it's past saving. Yeah. I'm like, oh, so you want to run it all the way into the ground first and then get mad when I'm like, hey, you run it into the ground, so you've left little for me to, I'm not interested, Oh, yeah, and you know what? If you did manage to resurrect it, they yank the rug out from under your feet anyway and take it back. Yeah, that's right. And so that's why I think some people around as this black speculative arts movement continues to grow, man, it's kind of like if you don't have the ability to work collaboratively, hey, you can have individual success, and I'm sure there are people that do that, but people these days I think are a lot more open to being collaborative than they were in the past, as long as you kind of set some ground rules or whatever, and you try and so I'd say at this point in the movement, we're getting a lot of cooperation, and movements are very fluid, and as I always tell people who are like who try and seek perfection, I was like, you got to remember, social movements are sloppy. There's not some type of, this is not a theoretical something happened in the abstract. This is happening in real time, and top-down organization does not work for those kinds of movements. No, it doesn't. It doesn't. You can't possibly do everything yourself. So you got to just say, hey, if you got a good idea, run with it. You got my support. Just try and have some parameters and make stuff cool that people are interested in. And I always tell people, just do your basic homework. Don't just call something Afrofuturistic because it's a black person and it's in the future. No, that's a little bit more involved in it. Study what people did before you and study what's going on now, and then try and find a way to make your own original contribution. Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the future, if you ever need, somebody who's got the finest sixth grade education that the Chicago public school system can provide, just give me a call, man. Are you still in Chicago? Yeah, I am. Oh, okay. Well, one of the things, I know I had a nice talk up at Northwestern in Chicago a couple of years ago. I wouldn't mind trying to put together a BSAM event in Chicago. I always tell every guest that if you're in the area, let me know and I'll take you to lunch, and then we could talk about those things, because putting something together like that is more than just a one day or a weekend event. What it is it's the creation of a new leg of the network. Of course. So and it's we're gonna, I think, like for example, next year with BSAM, we're gonna be down in the Caribbean next year. So
I'm actually going to move down. I think in about 4 or 5 years, I'm going to go to St. Croix.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah, because these Chicago winters, man. When you get to be as old as I am, they're killers.
Yeah, and they are. Yeah, I understand. And these winters, they my family, they're Southern folk. Yeah, these winters that we have wear and tear on the cars.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you had anything that you wanted to share with our audience, like one of the things that the most significant, things that you may have learned or seen or whatever that you might want to share at the end of the show now, because we're coming down to the last few minutes. What are some of the things that are of most significance that you would like people to start paying attention to that they may not be looking at?
I would say, oh my goodness, okay, 2 or 3 things. I often tell young people now, man, if I were 20 years younger now, that's kind of where I am now. I'm like, the tools that are available to create things, and raise money that weren't there even 10 years ago. Take a chance on yourself. I always tell people, if I'm with people who are, particularly religious, I always look at it, if I've prayed or meditated on it, me and God is a majority. So, don't follow the crowd. Don't be afraid to stand alone, in terms of pursuing something. I didn't know when I started this Afrofuturist project there was going to be anyone interested in it. It was like I just found people as I went along, and it was like we all found each other. And you'd be surprised how many people up there may be thinking like you. And I'm talking about the African American community, where I had a real simple prospect in terms of how I think about Afrofuturism, and as we approach our 400-year mark of being here. Right. If we were here before there was such a thing as the United States, and we're here now, then I can also imagine us being here after there no longer is a United States. So, and so that's how I think about Afrofuturism. So I don't get caught up in the who, once my mindset got more like that in the last few years, then, I still participate in civic society and all that, but I'm no longer caught up in the day-to-day who got who's going to be the senator or even the president. My thing is I'm more about legacies now in terms of 100 years from now, I want somebody to pick my book off of some library shelf or download it onto whatever a Kindle is 100 years from now and be like, man, I'm glad somebody in our community was thinking these things back then, and making an original contribution towards our intellectual tradition, so I'm really writing for people that aren't here yet, and that's kind of where my thought is right now. Because right now, the future is going to look back, they're going to look back on all of it and say, what did we do right now to try and make things a better 100 years from now? Because they're saying 2100 is looking pretty grim. So, they're going to look back and see who was petty, who was naughty or nice, and who had some insight. If you leave, what I'm saying? Like the same way we go back and study the Harlem Renaissance, they're going to look at who the key people were doing this stuff back in, and they'll figure out who was really about the work, who was a jerk and short-sighted, and who was this, that, and the other, who sacrificed, who didn't, to make a better way for all of us. And, and that's why I'm saying, usually Afrofuturism is for everyone who can appreciate it, because one of the things about black art is it's always been pretty democratic. If you got the chops, you got them. And it always generally gives permission for people to find themselves in creative models, and it impacts a lot of other things. And that's why I think what you'll see in the near future you're going to have some people that are going to probably try and say some things about the movement, the new art movement, or try and find a way to redirect it to where it says to fit some kind of existing social grant hustle paradigm and slap social justice on top of it. You know.
Well,
so
you already have people now who are trying to co-opt the term and trying to be the gatekeepers of a cultural movement.
Well, I mean, it's not so much right now. I mean, in terms of that was one of the things that put it this way, maybe the debate will start, but and I can email you the completed manifesto. I mean, a chunk of it's going to be published in Obsidian, the Obsidian Journal here in the Near Journal. But the complete manifesto is going to be published with the Unveiling Visions art catalog, or we're going to post it online. And so one of the things that we did in the manifesto, because even the one you see online now is incomplete. One, we define what Black speculative art is. Mm-hmm. We really define some things. What BSAM is. We define some elements, and we define them in a way, you know. And it's one of the things, as John talked about, some of these terms we come up, we've actually defined them. Right. And so, because, you know, it's one of the things, if you don't define them, other people will define it for you. Right. And so we've defined them, and so we'll let people argue it, and that's probably what you'll see in social media over the next several months. Well, why did you do this? And, you know, you might see me on some YouTube video, why you said that, and so forth. Yeah. So that's kind of what the period we're in right now, defining certain terms and citing them. And that's why I said it was so very important for the academic exercise part of this to take place. So somebody from Disney couldn't come in and say what it is.
Well, that's what I said at the very beginning of the show, that the brilliance of your approach was to define it from a scholarly perspective and not from a cultural meme or you know, some sort of sociological I can't think of the term, but the fact that you went and did this from a scholarly perspective was compelling and wise. I hate to cut you off, but we're kind of like out of time, man. Okay. You know, next time I'm down there or when you're up here, we got to sit down and talk, because I would enjoy that a lot. I think I have a lot to learn from you. And also, thank you very much for picking up my book. You know, I'm very thankful for that. And like I said, I'll get your. I'll friend you on BSFS, and I'll have you drop me your address so I could drop something in the mail to you. It's just something I give out to people who support my work. And again, thank you for that. Let's do this. Why don't you hang on the phone just for a little bit, and Jarvis is going to close out the show, and then we'll have a little brief talk, and maybe there might be a couple more questions once we're done with the recording, okay? Okay. All right. So, Jarvis, if you're awake, take it away.
All right. Thanks, guys. This has been very, very informative and motivational, listening to all the information you guys were sharing today. Thank you for coming on, Reynaldo. Thank you for being a gracious host, Will. And thank everybody for participating and listening in to this broadcast. I also want to encourage everyone to get active on the site and post information about what you're doing in the event section so that we can support what you're doing. And I just want to thank everybody for supporting the website, supporting the radio show, the magazine, and all the things that we do on Black Science Fiction Society. And then also some good news, we just finally upgraded our infrastructure for the Earth Squadron film. We have both updated software and new updated rendering service. So we're moving into the voice-over stage in the film, and very soon after into the animation portion. So check us out on earthsquadron.com with that project. And also we'll be sharing information on the Black Science Fiction Society site. All right, and with that, we're going to close it out and hang around for a few more minutes while this recording renders. And thanks again, everybody.
And thank you very much, Reynaldo. We've been talking to Reynaldo Anderson, and I'm sure we're going to have him back in the future. And, everybody who picks this up as a podcast, you're going to have to do your looking around for the links on, actually, he's Afrofuturism 2.0 is available at Amazon.com. Is the second edition coming out very, very soon, Reynaldo?
It'll probably be by March, but I would recommend people, instead of Amazon, go straight to Lexington Press to go purchase the book. It would be cheaper. Okay. Lexington Press. Or I think if you get the book before December, I even have a coupon that gives you 30% off if you use the coupon. So it's even cheaper. And they're going to probably have a paperback out in the spring.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. Well, on behalf of everybody who makes all this happen, I want to thank everybody who listened and wish you if you're listening live, a good weekend or a great day when you're picking this up as a podcast. And we'll catch you next Friday with another special guest. Thank you for listening, and good night.
Good night, everybody.